Hello, Lauren. How are you?
Hello, everyone.
Oh, hi. There you are.
Okay, so we have here the questions that your readers have sent to us. Just give me a second.
Okay.
Well, the first question everybody's talking about this one is how's everything going with the Fallen movie?
The Fallen movie wrapped today. Actually, they finished shooting. And I was over there in the middle of March for about 8 days, and I spent a lot of time on set and with the actors and with the director and the producers and all the crew. I'm so excited about it. I really was delighted by how it's coming together. And I wasn't sure what I was going to think about it, but it was an incredibly positive experience. The actors are so talented, so stunning. There's so much chemistry between them. And I just think it's going to be really, really beautiful. We have some really exciting news to share later this week, and you'll be hearing from me about that Thursday or Friday. And from then on, it's just going to be a lot of exciting releases coming up related to the movie.
Hey, that's great. So, do you have a release date for the movie, or they didn't decide it yet?
They haven't decided yet. It's definitely in 2015, the early part of the year. So I'm thinking probably March or April by this time next year.
Oh, in some like 12 months, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So once they finish, now that they've finished shooting, they have a few months to do the editing for the first round before we have what's called the director's cut.
Mhm.
So I will look at that, and Scott Hicks, the director, will look at that. The producers will look at that, and we'll make some suggestions, and they'll probably pull it into a closer form. And then I'm hoping we'll be able to release the trailer sometime this summer.
Okay, and well, how about Teardrop? How is everything going with the new saga?
Teardrop is wonderful. I'm really happy. I just turned in the second book, which I'm going to be able to show the cover of and talk about the title of very soon. I hope the new cover is so gorgeous. So it's just been finished, and it's really, I don't know, it's the most shocking book I've ever written, for sure. I was not prepared for where I was going to have to take Eureka, and I feel really proud of her and really proud of this book. It's coming out in the US in October, so I don't know if you guys publish a couple months after that, probably after you get the translation.
Okay, well, I believe that it's gonna be first in Spain, and then like 3 or 4 months after Spain, we will release it in Mexico.
Okay, great.
We have some questions from for all your fans. One of the question is from a guy that actually is his Twitter account is Fallen Oscuros, and his first question is, "What's next after Fallen? I mean, if there's any chance of a sequel after Torment."
um, I think that the Fallen series is really came to its closure with Rapture. Lucy Daniel's story is really finished, and I feel as if I let them go, and I gave them the best ending that they could have received. And I, for now, turned my full attention to Eureka and her story. So that's certainly what I've been working on the past couple of years, and what I'll be working on until the second book comes out later this year. I don't know what's next after that. I'm having another baby, so I'm going to be taking some time off with my family, and I'm looking forward to figuring out what it is that I'll be writing next.
Actually, the next question that some fans send you says like this: "You're pregnant again. Congratulations. Do you have any name in mind?"
Thank you. I'm really excited, and can't wait. It's happening very soon. We're having a boy this time, so we got to switch over to boy names. We have a few in mind. We haven't totally decided yet, and we haven't told anybody yet. But you'll find out in a couple of months.
Maybe Buddy Holly Kate or no.
Buddy Holly Cates, that's perfect. It's done.
Just kidding. Then another of the question: what will be your next project after Teardrop?
After Teardrop, I have a lot of ideas, and I always talk to writers who are starting out or working on books. I talk about keeping a journal of ideas, which is something that I've done pretty much my whole life. So that there is one location that I can turn to whenever I have inspiration or whenever I need inspiration. And I will probably be flipping through that notebook trying to figure out which of those ideas is the most compelling to me next. It feels a little ways off because I still have the second book in the Teardrop saga to finish. But it's happening soon, and I'm sure I'll have an update for you on that soon.
How many books are going to be in the Teardrop saga?
I thought there were going to be 3 books. I thought it was going to be a trilogy, and I started to write it, and I was really struggling with the ending of the second book, and I realized that I was so much closer to the ending of the story, the full story, than I thought I was. And I think, I know now, that the series is going to end with this second book. It's going to be a duology, I guess is what it's called. And the moment that I figured that out, all of my writing issues resolved themselves, and I just sprinted towards the finish line of this book and really relished figuring out the ending and how much and being that much closer to it than I thought it was. So it's a thrilling book. It's a really daring book, and probably my most action-packed and romantic ever.
Lauren, hi. People are asking about where you got your inspiration to make your sagas.
I get inspiration from all kinds of places. I mean, I think writers have to see the world continuously through a writer's lens, and you're looking at everything with the kind of vacuum attached to your vision. You're just trying to suck things up and steal them and hold on to them for stories. So I get inspiration from watching couples walk down the street and having an argument. I get inspiration from songs that I hear, newspaper stories that I read. In the case of Fallen and also of Teardrop, there are these old legends, old stories that are a part of our history, a part of our kind of cultural subconsciousness, because they're so old and they're so deeply embedded in our societies. I'm drawn to those kinds of stories, and I like to find a pocket within those stories and carve it out and insert love into it. So with Fallen, I use the Bible. I use the book of Genesis. There is everybody knows the story of Lucifer getting cast out of heaven, and I wondered if there was maybe a love story behind that betrayal, that initial betrayal between Lucifer and God. What if there was a broken heart at the core of all of that? With Teardrop, it was a similar experience. There's every culture has these flood narratives. We have Noah's Ark, we have the lost continent of Atlantis. There are all these old stories of civilizations being washed out by water, and I wondered if instead of Zeus or the god of the Old Testament, some angry god just casting down a thunderbolt, a lightning bolt, and flooding the earth, what if there was a heartbreak there? What if it was a girl who got her heart broken and cried a tear that was powerful enough to flood the entire world? And so I used a lot of this old mythology. I specifically used a lot of Plato's Atlantis to form my story around Eureka and her broken heart.
Another question that we have is, we remember that in Guadalajara you told in the presentation that your husband was your inspiration for the bad guy in Fallen. Is he the inspiration for another character in Teardrop?
I wouldn't say he's specifically an inspiration for a character in Teardrop, but a moment in my relationship with my husband was the inspiration originally for the story of Teardrop. I knew I wanted to write about Atlantis, and I knew I wanted to write about a girl who got her heart broken, but I didn't really know how to put those two things together yet. And one day I was crying, I was upset about something, and I was talking to my husband about it, and I was trying to make him understand why I was upset, and I was failing. We couldn't connect. We were having a hard time using words to get us close, and it was really frustrating to me. And my husband took his pointer finger, and he reached toward my face, and he caught a tear that was welled up in the corner of my eye on the tip of his finger. And he looked at the tear, we both looked at that tear. Without a word, he brought it to his eye, and he touched it to the corner of his eye, and he blinked, and my tear was absorbed into his eye. And it was a moment of connectivity. You know, I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt like we were connected by that tear without having to use any words. And I knew immediately, as writers do, that that was the opening scene of a novel, and that would be the thing that connected Eureka to this mysterious boy that she's just met named Ander. So that scene was lifted, basically, and placed into the opening pages of Teardrop.
We have another question by Juan Camilo Franco. He's asking, are you going to write about Cambriel?
Everybody wants to know about Cam. I certainly still think about Cam. And I think that his story ended much more cryptically than a lot of the other angels and demons stories did. And I think that that was fitting for Cam. I don't think he wanted a traditional happy ending. He says he doesn't. We know he doesn't. But I do still think about him, and I know he's very important to my readers. And by the way, I think you're going to die when you see the way that Harrison Gilbertson is portraying him in the film. He's perfect. Yeah, I don't know. It's something that I'm considering, but I'm not sure yet.
Okay, now Sylvia0492 is asking, when did you decide to write for the first time? Do you have a hard time expressing or putting in a paper what's happening, what was going on in your head, and making that everything got a sense?
Yeah, I think that writers often think that their best book is the next book that they're going to write. Their best book is the book that they only have the idea for, because it's very easy to get inspired and thrilled by the concept of something that you want to write, and very rarely, I mean, it's never happened to me, does the actual book resemble anything like what you thought it was going to be. The book is perfect until you write it, and then you figure out that it's full of all these flaws and struggles that you've had to work through. So I do think that there is a real difficulty in putting your perfect idea onto paper and finding it to be really messy. That happens to me with every book. I find that by the time I've been through 2 or 3 really strenuous drafts of a story, the story is what it wants to be, what it dreamed of being, but it's not necessarily what I dreamed of it being. It's quite different than I'd anticipated. And I think that's okay. I think that's actually better, because it's come to life in its own way because of the characters within it. So I think a lot of getting over that difficulty of putting your ideas down on paper is acknowledging that your characters need to become real, and they want to become real. And when you stop fighting them and you let them tell their story, even if it looks different than what you thought it would, things become a lot more natural, and that's when the story takes shape. I've always written. I first started writing when I was a young child. I mean, when I was first playing make-believe with my friends and by myself, and I first learned how to write, I was writing down stories. That's how I used to put myself to sleep when I was a kid. I would make up stories and I was always the hero in them and sort of reliving my daily life, but as a hero. I think I probably got serious about writing maybe when I was a teenager, and I don't know if that has anything to do with why today I still write about teenagers, but it seems like the most exciting time to write about for me.
Now, Nadine Schildknecht, I don't know how does this say, asking, what do you have in common with Luz?
What do I have in common with Luz? A few things, but not very many things. She's certainly not any kind of autobiographical representation of me. I think that the thing we have the most in common is our fierce defense of and allegiance to love. One of my favorite things about Luz is her openness. She has had a life up until the point where we meet her in Fallen that might cause another character to shut down, to build walls, to not open herself up to anything, because she's been hurt, and she's hurt people, and she's been made to feel like a monster. And somehow she manages to remain completely open to the possibility of love, of being loved, of being deeply in love. And she is so open that she's convinced, to the point where it consumes her, that love is possible with this guy who is completely ignoring her. And maybe some people would think that was crazy, but to me, it's a romantic pursuit, and it's an important pursuit. And I think that where Luz is being Luz in love, she and I are the closest in personality.
Okay, now Ahuri Ahoy is asking, hey Lawrence, nice to meet you. How do you feel about writing The Betrayal of Natalie Hargrove?
The Betrayal of Natalie Hargrove was the book that I wrote first out of all of my novels that have been published. And in some ways it was a really exciting book to write. It felt very transgressive because I was writing about my own high school experience. I was writing more autobiographically than I ever have before. And that's not to say I'm Natalie in the book, but the world that Natalie inhabits is the world that I grew up in and came of age in. And it was a kind of betrayal, I think, in the way that I wrote about it, but it really delighted me to get to tell that dark underside of my high school experience. And another thing that was really thrilling about it was using a Shakespeare play so closely as the inspiration for the plot. I mean, Betrayal of Natalie Hargrove is basically Lady Macbeth's story. If Lady Macbeth got to rewrite Macbeth from her point of view, this is the story that she would tell. It's a tale of betrayal, of course, but ambition and desire and shocking revelations. So it was a very delicious book, and I really enjoyed plumbing Shakespeare for endless inspiration. And I'm always excited when people are reading The Betrayal of Natalie Hargrove. It's one of my favorites.
Okay. Now, Frida2608 is asking, how do you create your characters? Do you base in any personal taste, platonic love, some past love? What's your inspiration for your characters?
Characters come from a lot of different realms. I mean, sometimes they are rooted in real people that I know. I mean, as I mentioned, Cam is based on my husband. Luz originally was based on a dear friend of mine, but she veered away quite quickly into her own territory when she started to do things that my friend had never and would never do. I think the biggest thing with characters is, again, really giving them freedom. And I think that's scary, because I think when it's like having a friend or a girlfriend or boyfriend who you think you know, and you want them to be the person that you know because you love that person, and you are drawn to that person, and you feel intimate with that person, you feel comfortable with that person. And when that person acts out or surprises you, throws you for a loop, does something that you don't think is quote unquote them, it makes us really uncomfortable for the most part. But and so again, when my characters wanted to do things that I didn't think they should be doing, it made me uncomfortable. I would think, no, that's not who she is. That's not what she'd do. Well, then why is she doing it? You know, why is the scene continuing to write itself in that way? Allowing your characters to surprise you in the same way as allowing real people in your life to surprise you is one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves and we can give the world. So I think my aspiration, and it's still hard for me, is to let my characters go. I try to release them as early as I can. And also to think very deeply and very constantly about what they want and what is standing in between them and what they want. And if you always know what the obstacles your character is facing are, and you always know where they're trying to end up and what they aspire to become, then you're going to be on the right path with them, and they're going to come to life and be unique and have a voice and soar.
Okay, now Constanza Dacunda asks, do you have any hard time writing the end of Fallen?
Yeah, I have a hard time writing everything in general. I certainly have a really hard time writing endings of books, and I certainly have a really hard time writing the endings of books. So this was my last chance to get things right in the Fallen world. You know, I was sort of felt as I was finishing up Fallen or Torment or even Passion that I still had another shot. There were still things that I could remedy in the next book if I needed to. But with Rapture, yeah, there were a lot of sleepless nights as I was drafting Rapture because I thought, I've got to get everything. And I didn't want to tie up everything. I didn't want to make it too neat and tidy at the end. And so there were certain things I wanted to be unresolved, but I had a lot of anxiety over whether the things that I thought should be unresolved were the right things. And so it was difficult. I wrote the ending several times. I think the ending within the realm of the book, within the chapters of the book, was more difficult than writing the epilogue. I always had a sense of how that epilogue would look and how Lucinda Daniels' aftermath would pan out. So that chapter was actually one of the easiest to write, but it was the getting there. It was the very, the penultimate moment and the climax of the book that I struggled with and rewrote and obsessed over for many months.
Okay, now Valentina Villagra asks, which one is your favorite book?
I think my favorite book is quite often my most recent book because I feel like, and I hope that with every book I'm getting better at this. I'm not getting better at the process of it. I still struggle with the writing just as much with every book. If anything, it gets harder. But I think by the time the final draft is complete, I've gotten closer to the story I wanted to tell than I was with the previous book. So with that said, now that the sequel to Teardrop has gone through my editor onto the copy editor, I can say that that's my favorite one. It's certainly compelling me the most right now, and it's keeping me really excited to be able to share more about it very soon.
Okay. And as a reader, what's your favorite book?
As a reader, what's my favorite book? This is another impossible question, maybe even harder than choosing your own favorite book out of your favorite books. Right now, I would say my favorite book is a new book that I've read. It's called The Orphan Master's Son. I have it right here. It's by Adam Johnson, and I read it about a month ago, and it is so good that I closed it and immediately opened it up again, and I'm rereading it. I haven't done that in a really long time, but there's something so exciting about what this book suggests, and the way that it's written is so lovely. I think everybody should read it, and if you check back with me in a year, I'll have a different favorite book, but this one is truly remarkable.
Alan Juvenal is asking, do you have any advice for a future writer?
Advice for a future writer, absolutely. I think, for starters, you have to figure out what it is that inspires you. I like old stories, and I like love stories. I like complicated romances. So I stare at couples having arguments, and I write down the nasty things that they say to one another, and I put them in my books. That's me. That's my inspiration. Each writer should figure out what his or her inspiration is, and then surround yourself with it. If it's nature for you, if it's music for you, if it's history for you, you make that as much of a part of your life as you can every day, so that you are inspired as much as you can be every day. And I think the next thing to know is that every story, almost every story, I would wager, starts off with a bang. People get really, we get really excited. We're delighted by this concept that we have. We can't wait to tell this character's story. We're really excited about the voice. And then somewhere along the line, maybe it's a paragraph in, maybe it's 20 pages in, maybe it's 100 pages in, you run out of air and you struggle and you get sick of the story and you don't understand the character anymore and you don't know where it's going. This is writer's block, and it strikes in all sorts of ways at all different times, but it happens to everyone, and it happens at some point in most books or stories. I think that aspiring writers need to know that's not an opportunity to walk away from a story. It's an opportunity to go deeper into the story, to learn more about your characters, to ask every element of the story where you went astray, and to find your way back through it. I used to abandon my stories whenever I got blocked, because I thought, I'm just not inspired by this anymore. I've got 50 other ideas that are more exciting to me. I'll start the next one. So I had 50 stories that I had started and nothing that I'd finished. I had to learn how to finish my stories, how to write through the block. And I think that's the first thing that every writer should do. Once you start to put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, you need to know and be firm with yourself that you will finish that story. You can always go back and make it better.
Mada Cordova asks, are you working on a new project? If it is, what is about?
Well, I've just turned in the sequel to Waterfall, the sequel to Teardrop. So I'm still, that's still consuming my mind, and it's still something that I will be working on when it comes back from the copy editor, making those final changes. And I have a couple of other ideas within that world of Teardrop that I want to explore, so I'm thinking about writing a short story or two. But then I don't know. I don't know what the future holds, and I'm excited to have a little bit of time to figure that out.
Now, Sid Moreno asks, is Daniel inspired in someone?
Is Daniel inspired by someone? He's not inspired by a real person that I've ever met. He is inspired by Lucinda, actually. He's inspired by the kind of soul her soul needed to be with. I think of them as puzzle pieces. I always have imagined that Luce, for all her foibles, has a really interesting shape to her character. And I wanted Daniel to come in and just fill in the space around her and as she changed, he changes, but at every turn, whatever shape she's in, he fits her.
Raisa Rebeles, our guest moderator, has just logged in. We have some technical issues, but now I'm gonna leave you with Raisa. Raisa, I think you know already know Lauren Kate. So Raisa, it's up to you now.
Great.
Wait.
Hi, Raisa.
I think she's just getting in.
I think we have a little problem with the camera and microphone. In the meantime, there's another question. This one is from Lady on Fire. It says that, what inspires you to make such an original story?
Are we talking? Is she talking about Fallen? Do you think?
Sorry, I didn't hear you well.
Well, never mind. I think the way that a story becomes original is through the specificity of the world. And with all of my stories, I try to slow down and get to know the characters and their setting as much as I can before I start writing. I'm always learning more about my characters, with every paragraph I write about them. And I think that the more focused you are on what makes them unique and what makes their problems unique and their aspirations unique, the more original your story becomes.
We have one last request before turning this chat to Raisa. Sofía Fiscal says, can you say something in Spanish?
You're putting me on the spot. Today I learned the Spanish word for cow because I'm teaching it to my daughter. So we were saying vaca all day. And we're talking about leche a lot and agua a lot. I know a little bit of Spanish, un poquito, but I love being in Mexico and being in Spain and all of the Spanish-speaking countries and learning more from you guys. When I was there in Guadalajara last year, my favorite Spanish phrase that I learned was "El amor nunca muera." Did I say that right?
Yes, it's El amor nunca muere. Yes. So now I'm going to turn this chat with Raisa. Raisa, Lauren. Raisa, it's all on you.
Hi, Raisa.
Hi. It's really nice to meet you. I'm a huge fan of your books.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too. I like your sweatshirt.
Thank you. I'm really sorry it took me this long to log in. We had a lot of technical difficulties.
Oh, I understand. That's frustrating. I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad I'm here too. So first off, can we go directly to the questions? Because a lot of your fans wanted me to ask you a lot of questions. So can we start right up? So first off, how did you come up with the idea for your books?
How did I come up with the idea for my books? Well, Fallen started with a line from Genesis, and Teardrops started with a line from Noah's Ark and Plato's Atlantis. I was fascinated by flood narratives and the old histories that so many cultures share around worlds that are wiped out by water. So I like to take very old stories that have a lot of mythic qualities to them and insert them into a modern world and give them a backbone of a love story. I'm most interested in telling love stories because I think when love is pure and captivating, it can be the most powerful force in the universe. And so I think of it kind of as a superpower. It enables my characters to do remarkable and otherworldly things.
So when you first came up with the idea, did you think it will be written in 4 books, or did you picture it as just one main book?
I did not picture it as one book. I knew it was going to be bigger than one book, but I didn't know how many books. I started to talk to my editor, and I was thinking at that point maybe it would be 3 books. And she actually suggested, she was really interested in Lucinda's past lives, and that wasn't, I was interested in them too, but I had not yet decided to devote an entire book to exploring her past lives. So Passion actually is a book that was born out of a conversation I had with my very wise editor. I can't imagine the series without it now. It feels so integral, but it wasn't something I was planning on from the beginning.
Right. So did you come up with the story first or with the characters first?
I came up with the smallest seed of the story, which was just an angel looking down from heaven, falling in love with a mortal girl, and losing his place in heaven because of that love. So that was what happened first. Then I wondered, well, why would an angel fall in love with a mortal girl? Why would an angel sacrifice his heavenly essence for some girl that he's attracted to? And I realized she had to have more to her. She couldn't just be a pretty face. And I started thinking about who Lucinda might be, what her character might contain, and I found very quickly in that this deep history, this long love story that she has with Daniel because of her condition of reincarnation. So I got to know her character slowly through that. And at the very bottom of that soul searching on her behalf, I found her true story and where she was headed. And so I think the character work was one of the first things that I did, but I had to know just a little bit about the story before I could figure out who was going to tell it.
Right. So I saw in an interview that Cam was based on your husband. Is this true?
Yes, it's true. He's the devil.
Are there no other characters that are based off real people that you know?
There are other characters who are inspired by real people that I know, but Cam is the only character who has sustained his connection to his original inspiration. Lucinda originally was based on one of my oldest friends, but it was almost more the physical attributes and the way she carried herself and the way that she spoke. Her desires, her passions, her fears, I mean, those very quickly had to become her own because of the circumstances that I was putting her in. And so she has a touchstone with my friend, but she's grown up, you know, by chapter 3 of Fallen, she has nothing in common with my friend. But Cam, for some reason, throughout the course of the entire series, stayed very, very close to my husband's character, and I think it drove a lot of my readers wild that I ended Cam's story the way that I did in Rapture, but there was no other way for me to end his story. I mean, it wouldn't have been true to his character or to the inspiration of his character, which is my husband's character, to tie him up with a bow and say, here's his happy ending. I love that Cam has stayed so close to my husband, and I love that so many readers connect with him because obviously he's the closest to my heart in the series, and it's been it's been interesting living with a character in a sense for the years that I was writing the books, because I could always turn to him and say, you know, here's the scene that I wrote with Cam, and here's what I think he's going to do next, and he'd make me mad sometimes because he'd say, oh no, you have to rewrite that, I would never do that. And I would think, no, you don't get to decide, I'm the writer, you're not the character, you're the inspiration. Right. But I would always go back and rethink it and think, he was right, Cam wouldn't do that either, I've got to change it.
So, is he your favorite character, or do you like another character the most, or do you like any
He's
character?
My favorite character. I think his enigmatic qualities are so alluring, and I adore him. I still think about him a lot, and honestly, I was the most nervous to see how he would be cast in the film and who would portray him. And I've been so pleased and so flattered by the way that Harrison is playing him. He's great.
Speaking of the movie, which a lot of people have been very curious about, did you like the cast? Do you think that all of them are what you are the incarnations per se of your characters?
Yeah, it's really surprised me how closely they match my imaginings. I think in part I always struggled in the years after Fallen was optioned for film when people knew that it was going to become a film, but before the actors had been cast. I always struggled with the question of who do you want to play these roles. I could never think of anyone, and I felt obligated to sometimes, and I would throw out names, but nobody ever felt right. And I think I'm so glad for that now, because it allowed this space to exist between the characters as I envisioned them and who they were going to become in the movie. I had a moment standing outside of Sword and Cross when I went to go visit the set when all of the actors were coming out of their trailers in costume for the first scene that I was going to see them shoot, and they were all walking toward me, and they looked so unbelievably cool and so very much themselves. You know, nobody had to introduce themselves. I knew exactly who they all were before I saw that. You know, as I was seeing them for the first moment, it just felt really perfect, and I hope and I believe that my readers are going to feel the same way.
So are you excited for the movie, or are you a bit more on the nervous side?
I'm not nervous anymore. I was nervous until I went to visit the set. I had, reservations about it all the way through for the past several years. A small part of the release of my nervousness has to do with having finished writing the books, and I'm removed from them in a sense now. I've given them to my readers. I've kind of released them in a sense, and that makes it easier to consider the new way that they're being brought to life in this film. So I'm glad that I've had some space between the writing of the books and the making of the movie. But the other thing is it just feels really right. It feels like it's going really well. The actors are portraying the characters with such honesty and dignity, and their chemistry is just thrilling. I don't have any more fear about it. I just have excitement.
A lot of your fans want to know if it's gonna stick to the stories. Have you had any chance to check out the script to see if it really follows the storyline, or if they've made a lot of changes? Because that was a huge worry of the fans.
I think you'll be very happy with the script. There are no sharp derivations. Screenwriting and novel writing are different in many numbers of ways, but one of the ways that they're different is the economy of a screenplay has to be, it's shorter. It just contains less scenes than a big chunky novel does. So there are things that happen in the book that don't happen in the movie, but there aren't really things that happen in the movie that don't happen in the book. I mean, it's very true to the characters and who they are and what they would do, and I felt very comfortable with it, and I believe that readers will too. I think they will.
So, going back to Cam, there have been a lot of rumors that there's going to be a book about him. Is this true? Can you confirm it?
I've heard those rumors. I cannot confirm it. I still think about Cam, but I don't have any plans just yet to write about him. I might at some point, but I'm not doing it yet.
Right. So, we cannot expect any more books from the Fallen series?
Not yet. Yeah, I'm working on Eureka's story. I'm working on the sequel to Teardrop, and I'm having a baby in about 6 weeks. So after that, I'll be taking a little time off to be with him and to be with my family. And when I come back up for air, I know I'm going to have a lot of stories that I want to tell, a lot of inspiration that I want to follow, but I have to wait until then to just talk about it.
Right. So, I've had questions that a lot of people wanted me to ask you, Rain, and I'm not that good with technology. I'm sorry. So, how do you decide when you have to kill a character? Is this premeditated, or does it just go with flow when you're writing the books? How do you decide that?
I think it works best when it's not something I necessarily plan on doing. When you follow a scene and let things escalate in ways that I hadn't anticipated. Penn's death, for example, in Fallen was one of those instances. I wrote the first draft and finished it, and Penn lived. And what happened was, well, to make a long story long, it had to do with Cam. I realized how much I cared about Cam in the first book of Fallen. I thought that he was the bad guy when I started writing it, and I thought that he was simpler when I started writing it. And the deeper I wrote into the book, the more I loved Cam. That's what happens when you base your bad guy on your husband. You fall in love with him. And so I realized he had this backstory that made him far more complex and far more, I guess, lovable and maybe redeemable than I had expected him to be. So it left this space in the book for a bad guy. I didn't have a bad guy anymore, I realized. And I went back through the first draft and I was looking for places to find one. You know, you would think the obvious answer would be Molly or Roland or one of the other demons, but I realized that there were all of these little seeds in Fallen that suggested that Miss Sophia was actually the bad guy. I hadn't written her that way. At the end of the book, she doesn't do any of the things that she does. But I went back and I wrote a second draft, I revised it, and Miss Sophia becomes truly evil and very calculating and very rash at the end of the book. And Penn was a casualty of that. I didn't think too much about it at the time. It just kind of wrote itself in the way that I think my best scenes do. And if I had thought too much about it, I might not have been able to do it, or I might have had to do it in a different way. But the way that it happens felt like the only way. And it was certainly hard for me, and I cried and felt terrified. But I don't regret it.
Right. So there is something I've noticed, and I don't know if you planned it that way, but the way the characters die is really swift. I mean, it's really quick. They die really easily. I found that too with Gabby and Molly. Is that intentional?
No, I mean, I think it makes sense for Miss Sophia's, the murder of Penn to happen very swiftly because it's so shocking, and she's right there with Luce one moment, and they have this connection, and they can really rely on each other, and then just like that, all of that security is whipped away, doubled by the fact that Miss Sophia is suddenly her enemy and the only person that she's left with in that moment. With Gabby and Molly, I think that it has to do with the way that angels die and the way that I envisioned the life going out of them. It couldn't have happened slowly. It's not a kind of drawn-out, torturous process. It's a poof, and they're gone. And I think that can be just as devastating, if not more so, than something that stretches out and we really feel, the last breaths leaving somebody's body.
Is there anything that you could change of your books, of the story, or are you pleased with what you've written?
No, I wouldn't change anything. And that doesn't mean sometimes I don't go back and struggle with some of the choices, but I certainly wouldn't change them. I think every choice that I made enabled me to write the ending of the book, and I'm so satisfied and so proud of that ending that I wouldn't want to mess with how I got there.
My favorite book is actually the third one, Passion. And I want to know how was the process of doing all of the research I'm sure you had to do to write all of the past lives?
Um, Passion is really one of my favorite books too. I love it deeply, but it was one of the most difficult books to write because of exactly what you're talking about. Setting is so important to me. It's so essential to the way that I tell a story, and it becomes a character of its own in all of my books. And with Passion, I had to switch settings and reacquaint myself with settings with every chapter. And for me, that was kind of like switching the main character, you know, like getting to know an entirely new protagonist with every chapter. And it was really hard to write in the first draft, especially. I mean, I did enjoy doing the research, and the way that I did research was through literature. I turned to my favorite books, my favorite novels, my favorite plays, and I found settings within them that excited me. And so I stole, you know, a setting. I lifted a setting from Ernest Hemingway's Farewell to Arms, and that was the hospital in Milan, and I stuffed it into this book. And so doing that kind of literary research was a pleasure, more so than turning to a history book necessarily. It made the research really fun, but it didn't make it any easier. It was still really difficult for me to make each of these lives feel true and complete and visceral, and so that we weren't just dipping in and out of something that didn't feel real or to matter. I wanted each of them to really evoke an entire world.
And was it hard to find a name that adjusted to the time and to the place?
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of fun. I guess that was like a practice for naming your children, trying to figure out like which name fit each one. I think my favorite one is probably when she's Ishat, which is her Mayan name when she lives in Mexico.
Yeah.
I think getting to know Lucinda in each of those settings was really cool and really helpful for me with her character, because discovering that she's not always the girl that we know in Fallen was really liberating, and it let me let her do all sorts of things that we wouldn't want her to do in her present lifetime, but she could do for 5 minutes or 5 pages in a past lifetime.
What is your creative and your writing process? Is there a point where you get an author's block? How do you overcome that?
I get writer's block all the time. I struggle a lot with my writing, and I complain about it a lot to anyone who will listen to me while I'm in the middle of a first draft. First drafts for me are very hard. I never think I'm going to finish my books. I never think they're going to come together. I never know what they're about. I just kind of blindly am plodding through them. And a lot of time I feel really bad about the pages that I write on a certain day. And even the days that I feel really great about the pages that I've written, I'm not always sure what they mean. But I have learned over the years not to worry about that. I still worry about it a lot, but it doesn't stop me from writing. I feel bad and I feel bad, and I keep writing and I keep going. And I get to the end of a first draft and I take a little break. And when I go back to it, I find, like I was talking about with Miss Sophia, I find seeds of things, elements of the story that matter, that are there that I hadn't known, threads to tie together that I didn't realize connected. And I find that the story knows itself better than I know it, or than I knew it in the first draft. And I get to know what it's trying to be, and I make it a lot stronger. And most of my second drafts, I mean, I'll cut 100 pages of what I've written, and I'll write 100 new pages. My books always end up being almost exactly the same length as they were in the first iteration, but they're entirely different by the time I'm finished. I would say revision is the biggest part of my writing process.
Did you know the ending of your books before you finish writing them?
No, I never know the ending. I have a sense of something that is supposed to be important at the ending, and often that thing happens, but it's less important than I think it's going to be, and there's something else that I could never have anticipated that becomes the thing about the ending.
I'm checking out the questions that your fans are sending, and a lot of them have been asking what happened to Lucinda's parents and all the other characters and didn't reach a conclusion.
Yeah, I think, Lucinda's parents, I always struggled with in writing Fallen because Luce's relationship with Daniel is so consuming, and it needs to be so consuming. It kind of blots out everything else. It doesn't leave a lot of space for Luce to go back in and call home and check in with her parents. I like to think about all of Luce's parents across time as being a single set of parents. And so in the epilogue of Fallen, of Rapture, when we see Luce meeting Daniel again for the first time, we know she has parents there. We know they've driven her up from Georgia, from Texas. We know that she has this family who supports her and who she loves but has problems with, just like all of our families. And so that's the most resolution that I can offer for Luce's family. But I appreciate the question.
Lauren, hi, it's Diego again. We have time for two more questions. Just want to let you know that we reached more than 400 viewers for this Hangout. Raisa, we're so much grateful with you by being here, having this dialogue with Lauren. Lauren, it's great to see you again. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with the Mexican readers, to tell us something about your second baby that's coming, so to tell us something about the movie, about Torment, about the Fallen Saga, about Teardrop. So now I'm going to leave you for the last two questions, and then we'll say goodbye to all of our readers.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Diego.
Just give us a second, please.
Right. All right, so a lot of people wanted me to ask you if it's true that the Betrayal of Natalie Hargrove is going to be taken, it's going to become a TV show. Is that true?
Oh, not yet, but I think that's a great idea. That's actually what I've always hoped for with the Betrayal of Natalie Hargrove. I think it would make a great TV show. So I will absolutely keep you posted on any news about that.
All right. And did you know if Fallen was signed up for all of the books to become movies, or just the first one for now?
All of the books will become movies. The Fallen movie is just the Fallen movie, just the story of the book Fallen. But I was already talking to the producers when I was in Budapest a few weeks ago about when they're starting on Torment, and we'll know more about that later this summer. But that is the plan as of now. So it'll be great. It'll be 4 or 5 movies.
Great. So they say just a couple of questions, but well, I guess we can continue.
Come on, do the questions, do the questions.
Do you know if the following cast will be at Comic-Con this year?
Yeah, there is a big program planned for the Fallen movie at Comic-Con. I don't know exactly which members of the cast yet, but the movie will be represented at Comic-Con. I will hopefully be there myself if I can talk my baby into letting me go. And I'm really looking forward to it. It'll be great.
Raisa, Lauren, unfortunately we have to go now. Do you guys both have one final word for your fans in Latin America?
Adios y gracias.
Raisa, something that you want to add for all your fans, for Lauren?
Muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí, gracias por mandarme todas las preguntas. Estaba sacando todas las preguntas de sus tweets, sus comentarios en Facebook, sus comentarios en YouTube, y en todas partes no las podía ver. Anoté las que más me dijeron. And thank you so much, Lauren, for taking the time to speak with me, to have a talk with your Mexican viewers. And I really, really enjoyed your books. They were fantastic.
Thank you, Riza. Thank you so much for your questions and for doing this tonight. And thanks to all of you who showed up and brought your questions and listened to the chat. And I hope we will get to talk together again soon. Thank you.